My name is Sylvia Jean Hartwell, and I turned 64 last November. I'm going to tell you something I've never said out loud to anyone except my sister, and even then I only got halfway through before I started crying so hard I couldn't finish, so bear with me. This is not an easy story to tell, but I think it needs to be told. I live alone in a small craftsman house in Decatur, Georgia. I've lived here for 11 years, since my husband Gerald passed. The house is too big for one person. 3 bedrooms, a sunroom I never use, a kitchen with more cabinet space than I'll ever fill. But I stay because Gerald picked out the tiles in the bathroom himself, and I'm not ready to leave that behind. I have one son. His name is Wesley. Wesley is 41 years old. He's tall like his father, broad-shouldered, with that same slow smile that used to make me feel like everything was going to be okay no matter what. He has 2 children, a girl named Penny, who just turned 7, and a boy named Cal, who's 5. I know their birthdays. I know what Penny's favorite color was, the last time I was allowed to see her, which was lavender. I know Cal was afraid of ceiling fans as a toddler. I know these things because I used to be their grandmother in the full sense of the word. I used to be there. That stopped 3 years ago. It stopped when Wesley's wife, my daughter-in-law, decided she didn't want me in their lives anymore. I won't go deep into what happened because that's a whole other story, and honestly, I'm still not sure I understand all of it myself. What I know is that one Sunday in February, Wesley called me and said very quietly that it would be better if I gave them some space. Some space, like I was standing too close. Like 62 years of living and raising a child and burying a husband and holding myself together with both hands could just be politely asked to take a step back. I said okay. Because what else do you say to your child? I cried for 2 weeks straight after that. My sister Noreen drove up from Savannah and stayed with me for 4 days. She brought soup and didn't make me talk if I didn't want to, which is why she's my favorite person on earth. After that, I learned to live with it. You do. You don't get over it. Anyone who tells you that you get over losing your child's presence in your life is either lying or hasn't experienced it, but you learn to carry it differently. You put it somewhere in your chest where it's always heavy but doesn't knock you over every single morning. I threw myself into my garden. I started going to a book club at the library on Thursday evenings. I got a cat named Biscuit who is rude and demanding, and the best thing that's happened to me in years. I built a life that looked, from the outside, like a woman who was doing just fine. And for 3 years, I was, mostly. Then, on a Thursday morning in early October, there was a package on my front porch. I almost walked past it. I'd ordered some new gardening gloves from an online shop, and I assumed that's what it was. But when I picked it up, I noticed it wasn't from any store. It was a flat box, the kind you'd get from a shipping center, wrapped in brown paper. My name and address were written in handwriting I recognized immediately. Wesley's handwriting. I stood on the porch for a full minute just holding it. Biscuit was weaving between my ankles, which is his way of telling me I'm taking too long and breakfast is late. I barely noticed him. I brought the box inside and set it on the kitchen table. I made my coffee first. I needed a moment to just breathe, and then I sat down and opened it. Inside, nestled in white tissue paper, were 2 jars of homemade preserves. 1 apricot, 1 blackberry. There was a small card tucked against the side, handwritten on plain note card paper. It said, "Mom, I've been thinking about you. I hope you're doing well. I made these myself. Wesley." That was it. 8 words and his name. I read it 4 times. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment because it wasn't what you might expect. It wasn't pure joy. It wasn't warmth flooding through me. Hallelujah, my son remembered me. Hallelujah, my son remembered me. What I felt was complicated. There was happiness, yes, a sudden bright, sharp happiness that hurt a little, the way your eyes hurt when you walk into sunlight after being in a dark room. But underneath it, quiet and cold, was something else. Unease. I couldn't explain it then. I just felt it. Something about the timing. 3 years of nothing, and then this, out of nowhere, with no phone call first, no explanation. No, I'm sorry it's been so long. Just 2 jars of jam and 8 words. I sat with it for a while. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I told myself that this was exactly the kind of response a person has when they've been hurt. They become suspicious of kindness. I told myself my son made me preserves with his own hands, and that was something. I opened the apricot one that evening with a piece of toast. It was good. It tasted like something you'd buy at a farmer's market. Sweet, a little tart, the right consistency, not too runny. Wesley had never been particularly domestic, but apparently that had changed. 2 days later, I had my neighbor Trudy over for coffee. Trudy is 71, a retired school teacher, and the most sensible person I know. She has this way of listening where she goes very still and you can tell she's actually hearing every word, not just waiting for her turn to speak. We've been neighbors for 8 years, and she knows more about my life than most people. I told her about the package. I showed her the card. I showed her the jars. I'd only opened one. She held the unopened one. She held the unopened blackberry jar up to the kitchen light and looked at it for a moment. Then she set it down and asked me, gently, how I felt about it. I said I didn't know. She said that was honest. I asked her if she thought I should call Wesley. She said that was my decision to make, but she thought the fact that he'd sent his address with the return label was maybe an invitation. She was right. There was a return address. I hadn't even thought about that until she said it. Before she left, she asked if she could have the blackberry jar. Her granddaughter was visiting that weekend, and the girl loved blackberry anything. I said of course. I wasn't sure I was going to open the second one anyway. Trudy took it home. That night, I sat in the sunroom, the one I never use, and I wrote Wesley a letter, a real one, on paper. I told him I'd received the package and that the apricot preserve was delicious. I told him I thought about him and the children often. I told him I wasn't angry. I told him I hoped we could find our way back to each other, whatever that looked like, at whatever pace he needed. I sealed it and put it by the door to mail the next morning. At 11 o'clock that night, my phone rang. It was Trudy's husband, a quiet, steady man named Ronald, and he sounded frightened. He said Trudy had gotten sick. She'd had some of the blackberry preserves with crackers before bed, and within an hour she was vomiting. Her heart was racing, and she had a numbness in her hands and feet that was getting worse. He'd called an ambulance. They were at the hospital. I got dressed and drove there without thinking. I sat with Ronald in the waiting room for 2 hours. He kept turning his cap in his hands. I kept thinking about the jar, about how I'd handed it to Trudy without a second thought, about how I'd opened the apricot one myself and had 2 pieces of toast, about how I hadn't gotten sick. I didn't say anything to Ronald yet. I didn't know what I knew. I didn't know anything. I told myself it was probably nothing to do with the jam. Maybe Trudy had something else. Maybe she was coming down with something. Maybe it was coincidence. I am a logical person. I do not jump to conclusions. I sat there and I breathed and I waited. The doctor came out and said Trudy was stable. She'd been treated for what they were describing as acute poisoning, likely ingested. They wanted to know what she'd eaten. Ronald went back to speak with them and I sat alone in those plastic waiting room chairs, and the word poisoning hung in the air in front of me like something I could touch. I called my sister Noreen at midnight. I know that's late. She didn't care. I told her everything. The package, the card, the jars, Trudy. There was a long silence. Then Noreen said very carefully, Sylvia, where is the apricot jar right now? It was on my kitchen counter, open, with a spoon resting across the top. She said, don't eat any more of it, and don't throw it away. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I called the non-emergency police line. I didn't know what else to do. I explained the situation carefully. The package from my estranged son, the homemade preserves, my neighbor's hospitalization, the word poisoning from the doctor. I was calm. I was deliberate. I gave them every detail I had. They sent 2 officers to my house that morning. I let them in. I showed them the box, the tissue paper, the note card. I showed them the open apricot jar. They bagged it all. They were professional and they were kind, and one of them, a young woman with close-cropped hair, asked if I had somewhere I could stay for a few days. I said I had my sister in Savannah. I called Noreen, and she said, come now, come today. And I packed a bag and brought Biscuit in his carrier, and I drove south and I did not look in my rear view mirror. Here's what I learned over the following weeks, pieced together from phone calls with the detective and, eventually, from a conversation I had with Wesley himself that I am still trying to make sense of. The apricot preserves had a small amount of a toxic substance in them, enough to cause serious illness, possibly worse, depending on how much a person ate and how their body processed it. I had eaten 2 small pieces of toast. 2. Whatever was in there had not been enough to cause me visible symptoms, but the lab results were not ambiguous. The blackberry jar, the one Trudy had eaten, contained a significantly higher concentration. When the detectives contacted Wesley, he didn't run. He didn't deny it outright. What he did. And this is the part that I come back to, over and over, in the quiet hours when Biscuit has settled on my feet and the house in Savannah is still. What he did was say that it wasn't supposed to go the way it went. I don't know what that means. I've turned it over in my mind so many times the edges are worn smooth. It wasn't supposed to go the way it went. As if there was a way it was supposed to go. As if this had a script, and the script had just gone off in the wrong direction. He had a lawyer by the time anyone tried to ask him specific questions, and so a lot of what I know is incomplete. What I do know is that his wife was not involved. Or at least that's what was determined. That surprised me. It did. I had spent 3 years holding her responsible for the distance between me and my son, and the truth, the terrifying truth, is that whatever happened here, she wasn't the architect of it. That means something. I'm still figuring out what. I stayed at Noreen's for 6 weeks. I helped her with her yard. I read 5 books. I called Trudy every few days. She recovered fully, thank God, and she called me her favorite neighbor, the first time I heard her laugh again over the phone, and I had to excuse myself to go cry in Noreen's bathroom for 10 minutes. She doesn't blame me. She said that without me having to ask. She said, "Sylvia, you didn't know." She's right. I didn't. But I carried it anyway. I went back home in December. My house looked the same. The garden had been neglected for 6 weeks, and the late fall beds were a mess, but the rosemary was fine. Rosemary is always fine. Biscuit walked through every room like he was conducting an inspection before declaring it acceptable. I didn't open the sunroom. I still haven't opened that letter I wrote to Wesley. It's still by the front door where I left it, sealed, with a stamp that's been there so long, the adhesive has probably given up. I don't know what to do with it. It feels wrong to send it now and wrong to throw it away. Some mornings I pick it up and hold it for a minute before I put it back. I think about Penny and her lavender phase. I think about Cal and his fear of ceiling fans. I think about whether they know anything, whether they ask for me, whether there's any version of the future in which I get to sit at a kitchen table with those 2 children and just be their grandmother. I don't have an answer to that yet. What I have is this. I am 64 years old. I buried a husband. I raised a child. I have a cat who is rude and demanding and sleeps on my feet in the winter. I have a sister who drives up from Savannah without being asked. I have a neighbor who recovered and called me her favorite. I have a garden that's coming back. I don't know what happened to my son. I don't know what he became or when or how I missed it. That question keeps me up sometimes, the how did I miss it question. I have turned it over every way I know how, and I still don't have an answer that satisfies me. I think sometimes that the shape of grief for a child who is still alive is very strange, because there's no ceremony for it. No casseroles from the neighbors. No one sends flowers. You just go on, carrying this thing that doesn't have a name. If you're watching this and you know that, wait, and I think some of you do, because I see it in the comments, I see it in the things you write, and I want you to know I read them, then I want you to know that you are not alone in this. Whatever happened between you and your child, whatever distance has grown there, whatever silence has taken up residence in your house, you are not alone. You don't have to be okay yet. You just have to keep going. I'm still going. That's enough for today. I've thought a lot about what kind of person I was before all of this happened and what kind of person I am now. Those aren't the same person. I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because it's simply true, the way it's true that a bone that breaks and heals is never quite the same bone. It's often stronger in that exact spot, but it's different. You can feel the difference if you press on it. What Wesley did had a logic to it that I'll probably never fully understand, but I've come to believe that the choices we make toward the people who love us, especially the choices made from a dark and hidden place, have a way of circling back, not because the universe is keeping score, not because some invisible force is balancing a ledger, but because actions have weight, and weight goes somewhere. You cannot carry something that heavy and remain unchanged by it. Whatever was living inside my son that allowed him to do what he did to me. That thing was already shaping his life long before I knew anything about it. I was just the last to see it. And Trudy. I think about her every day. She did nothing. She sat in my kitchen and held a jar up to the light and asked me how I felt. And then she took that jar home because her granddaughter loved blackberry. That's all. That is the whole of her involvement. And she spent 3 days in a hospital because of it. If there is anything in this story that I find impossible to make peace with, it's that an innocent woman suffered because I handed her something without knowing what it was. What I've learned, and I mean really learned, not just understood intellectually, but felt in my body, is that trust has to be earned fresh. It cannot run on old credit. I loved Wesley because he was my son, and I had loved him for 41 years, and I let that old love do the work of judgment that judgment needed to do for itself. That was my part in this. Not guilt, exactly, but responsibility. There's a difference. Trusting your instincts is not paranoia. That unease I felt when I held that box on the porch, that was intelligence. My body knew something my heart wasn't ready to accept. I overruled it because I wanted so badly for the story to be a good one. I wanted the jam to mean what it looked like it meant. I wanted my son back. And that wanting made me careless in a way I can't afford to be careless again. Noreen told me once that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's deciding that something else matters more. I think that's right. But I'd add something to it now. I'd say that wisdom is knowing when to let the fear speak first, not to stop you, just to slow you down long enough to look clearly at what's in front of you. I'm 64. I have more years behind me than I once thought I'd have, and I hope more ahead than I can currently see. I intend to spend them with my eyes open. That's not bitterness. That's just who I am now. Sylvia Jean Hartwell, still going.